Right, we're going to talk a little bit about traversing arrays in Java. So let's say we create a new array named data that's got 20 integer values. Now, right now, we haven't assigned any values to it. So one way to use traversing an array would be to assign the values. Generally, at this point, when you're traversing arrays, you're going to be using loops. Later in the course, you'll learn about recursion, another way that you might traverse a loop, but the standard way is to use a loop. So let's say we want to use a for loop, and we know for loop's a good choice here because we know there's 20 elements. So I could say for int I equals 0, I less than 20, I plus plus. We say less than 20 because if there's 20 elements, they're numbered from 0 to 19. And then I could say data of I equals int of math.random times 21 minus 10. Int of math.random will give us a number from 0 to 20 inclusive. So if we subtract 10 from that, we'll get a number from negative 10 to 10, right? There's 21 total values in there, which is why times 21, because we have negative 10 up to negative 1, then 0, then 1 through 10. So that would assign those values. We could do the same thing with a for loop. Where I'd say instead of I less than 20, I'd say I less than data.length. Length is an instance variable. Of the array class. So the fact that it's an instance variable means it's not we don't put parentheses because it's not a method. Every array has a variable that it remembers how long it is. So every array always knows how long it is. That we could use for any array, and then we don't have to know the number at the point where we write the code. And we'd have the same equals int math.random times 21 minus 10. I could do the same thing with a while loop. So I'd say same thing, data I equals int of math.random times 21 plus 10, add 1 to I. So any of these would work as a loop to traverse the array to assign the values. Now, another thing that we might want to do is print out the values. And that's pretty simple. One way to do that is just for I equals 0, I less than data.length, I plus plus, We could use a while loop. We can even traverse it backwards too. So we could say int I equals data dot length minus 1. Why would we start at length minus 1? Because remember, if there's 20 elements, they're numbered from 0 to 19. So the last element would be element 19. But the length is 20, so we get the length, subtract 1, and that's the index of the last element. Well, I is greater than or equal to 0 because we want to go down to 0 because there is an element 0. Those are forward and backwards. And you can use a for loop to print it out backwards, and you can use a while loop to print it out forward. There's nothing special about doing one way or the other. I do want you to note that this right here doesn't reverse the order of the elements in the array. It just prints them out in reverse order, right? So that'll be important later. Sometimes you'll want to actually reverse the elements. This doesn't do that. This just prints them out in revert from the end to the beginning rather than the beginning to the end. A third example for traversing say we could find the sum of the elements in the array. So here we'd want to look at each element, but we'd want to add them together. So we would say maybe int total equals 0. Int I equals 0. 0 less than data.length. I plus plus, we have a for loop again. And then we say total equals total plus data I. And when we get done with this, total will be the sum of the elements in the array. And another reason that we might traverse an array is traversing it, say, to find a specific value. So here I'm going to show you an example using a method. So let's say we wrote a method. Let's say one of the possibilities is there's no negative values in the array. Well, in that case, we'd want to return an index that we know wasn't a possible index. So we'll return -1 because -1 isn't a valid index in Java. So we have a method public static int index of first negative so it looks through the array data and returns the index of the first negative. So we have a loop. We have to traverse this. So we'll say for, just for a variation, I'm going to say for int n equals 0, n less than data dot, data dot length, n plus plus, if data n is less than 0, we want to return what? We want to return n. We want to return the index. So we return n. What we do if we go all the way through the loop, we look at every value and there aren't any negative values, then if we get through the loop, we want to return -1. Notice as soon as you have a return, the method will end. So we'll stop traversing the array as soon as we, in this case, as soon as we find one negative value. So if the first number was -5, we'd return 0 and stop. So this is, or these are examples of traversing an array in Java using standard for and while loops.